Hi, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my craft room. Today I have a pretty pink Posh project, and I thought it'd be a lot of fun to create a birthday mug cake with a candle on it. So I'm using lots of dies from Pretty Pink Posh, all three of the mug die sets. So I have the winter mug dies that I use to cut out the mug, and the window from the birthday mug edition dies, as well as the candle. So I die cut it out of a lot of different colors because I'm going to be layering colors together to make a fun candle. I also die cut the whipped cream, which is going to be the frosting part of my mug cake from the Valentine mug editions, and then a piece that will be the inside of the mug that I'm going to color and stamp to look like some vanilla cake. I also have the frame from the Fancy Cake dies. I just wanted to add a frame around my images on the front of my A2 size card. And then I also am going to be using these adorable clay confetti pieces called the Birthday Cake Clay Confetti, and that's what inspired the colors for today's card. I also have one of the stencils. This is the streamer stencil. It's a 2-pack layering set, and I picked a bunch of different distress oxides that I thought matched the colors of my paper as well. So I have a 6x6 piece of cardstock, and I'm going to be using some dome foam applicators to help me add the color through the stencil onto this white cardstock. I'm going to be using, like I said, 4 different colors. So I'm starting first with picked raspberry. I thought it matched my pink cardstock really well. And then I'm going to jump over into carved pumpkin. And then I brought out scattered straw, but when I opened it, I realized that I really wanted squeezed lemonade. I wanted that bright yellow. And then finally, I have cracked pistachio to be the green of my streamers. So once I have all of that color down through my first stencil, I love a good stencil reveal. I'm going to layer on my second stencil, and this time I'm going to be using some stencil paste. So this is Platinum Stencil Butter from the Crafters Workshop, and I'm just using a palette knife and I'm scraping up some of that stencil butter, and I'm going to apply it through my second stencil. So my streamers will have some bright colors on one side, and then as it twists, it's going to be a pretty platinum silver color. So once I'm all done adding that stencil butter, I'm going to do another stencil reveal, and I absolutely love the design that this creates on my cardstock. I think Pretty Pink Posh's layering stencils are truly the best. I'm going to do a little hot foiling, and I'm going to be using the new foil plate that says Celebrate, and I'm just trimming using my supplies here for my foiling, and I cut a piece of white cardstock. It's a very slick cardstock to do some foiling, and then some silver foil so I can match that platinum stencil butter that I did on my background. I ran it through my hot foiling and then through my machine, and here you could see my reveal as I peel back the paper and foil, and I think it turned out really great, and I love this Celebrate sentiment and just that shine that it gives with that hot foil. I love also that there is a shadow die that I can use to cut it out. So I'm grabbing the large Celebrate shadow die, again, the shadow out of the 2 dies in that set. And I'm just going to use some repositional tape to help keep that die in place. And I will run it through my die cut machine so my sentiment will be die cut out. So now that I have all of my stenciling and die cutting done, I want to start assembling my mug shaker. So my shaker will be fully enclosed inside of this green mug, but I do need to cut an acetate window. So I'm going to use my die and just cut it out without the handle because I just need the actual mug part to be the acetate cover of my shaker. So I'm trimming down just so it covers that die cut window out of my green mug, and then I can start assembling my shaker together. So I wanted to add a little bit of color to my images. So I grabbed my dome foam blender that I used with my cracked pistachio, and I didn't add any more ink to the blender. So I'm just going around using that excess ink on that little sponge and adding it to my 2 pieces. I wanted some of that green ink to shine through the window of my mug, and then also added the details to the mug that will be the front of my shaker. I grabbed some 1/8 of an inch double-sided adhesive and I'm adding that adhesive around the window on my shaker, and then I'm peeling off the release paper and I'm going to adhere my acetate. So that will be the top of my shaker so I can see all of my little sprinkles or jimmies, I guess depending on where you're from, inside of my mug. I'm grabbing some foam adhesive and I'm going to peel off both sides of the release paper. So I pulled it off and then I also peeled off the release paper on the other side, and that allows me to be able to curve and rotate my foam adhesive without any constriction from the paper. I poured in some of my clay confetti. Again, this is the birthday cake clay confetti, and I'm making sure I like the coverage of all of my sprinkles, and then I'm adhering the back side of my shaker on. I'm using the handle of my mug to help me make sure it is perfectly lined up on the back. And there is our fun little shaker. So now we're going to decorate it. Like I said, I wanted this to look like a mug cake. I don't know if anyone's made a mug cake before. So I'm going to grab some sprinkles that are from the birthday sentiment stamp set. I think it's supposed to be confetti, but I thought I would use it to add some details into my cake. So I didn't want it to be just one solid piece of vanilla. I wanted it to look like it had some details. So I'm using some brown ink that's alcohol marker friendly, and I stamped a bunch of that confetti onto that cream colored cardstock, and then I'm going to use some alcohol markers to add a little bit more color. So I'm just choosing some light browns from my Ohuhu art markers, and I'm adding in some of that color to create what looks like a nice pretty cake inside of our mug. I wanted it to have, like I said, some texture and some color. I didn't want it to be a flat image of cake. So while some of this will get covered with our frosting, I still wanted to create some dimension and have a little fun with my cake. So now I'm just adding a little bit more dots, and with that I'm going to take one more time my marker and completely cover it and just try to blend all that color together, and now I can glue it to inside of my mug. I'm just using some wet glue, and that just gives me a little bit of extra time. I call it my wiggle room, to make sure that I can place my die perfectly where I want it, to wiggle it around and make sure it's right where I need it to be. I'm taking the whipped cream die cut piece now, and I want it to look a little bit like vanilla frosting. So I'm grabbing another alcohol marker and a warm gray and just adding a little bit of shadow to create more dimension on this die cut piece. I love die cutting these kinds of dies out of colored cardstock and then just using some ink to create shadow on it. It saves some time rather than completely coloring an image in, or completely coloring some white cardstock in, let's say, green for our mug. This is just one of my favorite ways to really step up die cut pieces. It's just to start with some solid colored cardstock, and then, like I said, use ink or alcohol markers, whatever you have in your stash, to create some shadow and dimension. For my candle, I started with the orange, so that way the wick would be orange, and then I glued on the white rectangle to be the actual candle, and then I glued on yellow to be the flame. And I'm going to save my pink detailed candles kind of to create a pink and white striped candle there on the side. And before I glue those on, I'm adding again more details to my die cut images. I grabbed a yellow alcohol marker to add in some details to the flame, and another warm gray colored alcohol marker to add in details onto the white part of my candle. And this is a blender that I'm just using to soften the edges of the alcohol marker that I added. So now I'm going to use a jewel picker and wet glue to glue on the pink details of my candle. So I added some glue to where I want to glue down these stripes, and then I'm just using my jewel picker to pick them up off of my glass board and then add them onto the candle. Again, I like using wet glue, so I have that little bit of wiggle room to make sure I have those stripes perfectly where I want them. I'm following the details of the die set. There's nice little striped details that show me where I can line up those pieces. And then I grabbed a pink marker and again adding a little bit of shadow and detail to the pink stripes of my candle. Once those are done, I'm going to glue these to the top of my my mug cake, and my candle's a little tall, so I'm going to glue it behind my frosting here. I'm just lining up the bottom of my candle with the bottom of my frosting, and then I'm going to again glue this to the top. So you can still see the details of my cake, but yet I have some nice vanilla frosting on the top of my cake here. Once I'm happy with how it looks, we can move on to creating the rest of the card. I'm going to set aside my shaker. It's going to fit just perfectly on the inside of my A2 frame, and I know that I want my Celebrate to kind of overlap the whipped cream and the candle and my mug, so I will figure that layout after I'm done creating my background. My stencil paste was almost dry. There was still a couple areas that were a little still tacky, so I used my heat gun just to help speed up that process. And here I am using my A2 frame to figure out where exactly I need to trim my background down, where I will still see some of that pink streamer on the top and green streamer on the bottom. I have a top folding A2 card base out of some ultra thick Nina white cardstock. I believe it's about 110 pounds. And then I'm going to glue on my streamers that I trimmed down to be just slightly smaller than A2 to the center of that card base. And then I'm using some glue to adhere my frame. I did die cut this out of some sparkly, it's like some white glitter paper, just to add a little bit of shine around the edges of the card. Once that's in place, I can adhere down my candle and my cake. Now there is a lot of dimension where the mug is because I use some foam to create the shaker portion of my images here. So I'm applying that same foam behind the candle and wet glue behind my mug and adhering that to the center of the card. This is where I'm playing around with my Celebrate sentiment and I'm trying to figure out the best place for it, and I want it to be closer to the top. So it's going to overlap the frosting and the candle. So I'm taking some more of that foam adhesive. Again, there's a lot of dimension because of that mug, and I'm going to place it around the CE and the TE on the other side of my sentiment, since I don't need adhesive in the center, or I don't need any foam adhesive, I should say. And again, I took off both sides of my foam, added it behind the letters that would be touching the background, and attaching it to my card. I hope this card inspires you to use your mug dies and create a shaker, especially for a birthday coming up. I really love how bright and colorful this turned out, and I love that I chose colors to match that birthday cake clay confetti mix. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!